very special bonus episode of You'll Only Listen Twice, our podcast where we're taking a look at all the James Bond films, both official and unofficial. As always, I'm Jake. Last week, we covered License to Kill, and Jan, producer Paul, and I, our other host, Troy, I'm not really sure where he was, but we were able to talk to someone who actually worked on License to Kill, Mr. Pedro Armendáriz. Not to be confused with his father, Pedro Armendáriz, who played President Lopez in the film, or even his grandfather, Pedro Armendáriz, who played Karen Bay in From Russia with Love. No, we talked to Pedro Armendáriz, the second AD of License to Kill. But if you tuned in last week, you only heard part of the interview. I know what you're thinking. You guys edit this show? I know, I'm just as surprised as you. Yeah, actually, no, we actually had to cut down on the interview to make it fit in our License to Kill episode. So we figured this week we would give you the entire interview in full. I hope you find it informative. I hope you have fun. We had a ton of fun talking to Pedro. He's a really cool guy. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and take a listen to our conversation with Pedro Armendáriz. Enjoy.
Yay! How are you guys? Thank you for having me.
No, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
taking time out of your very busy schedule to talk to us.
About this old franchise.
We are going to talk about License to Kill, and we had to bring you on for this episode because not only was your dad in License to Kill, but you were in License to Kill. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, as you guys know, the License to Kill was filmed among many places, Mexico City and Mexico, the whole country. It was shot in Toluca. It was shot in Mexico City. It was shot in Baja California and Florida. Basically, those are the four places that were used as locations for the film. And I had the privilege, or the unfortunate privilege, to work as an assistant director in the main unit here in Mexico.
Did they film in Mexico for budget reasons or why?
No, basically they shot it in Mexico because remember the movie is supposed to take place in on a fictitious country and
Isthmus.
And Barbara Broccoli had a long list of friends here in Mexico, and she always wanted to film a James Bond flick in Mexico. So that was a chance for them to finally realize their dream of coming to Mexico and do a James Bond film here in Mexico. So basically, that was it.
That's great. I mean, Mexico is a great location of the movie. Acapulco is a dump now. It's horrible, but in the late 80s, I think it was still nice, no?
Remember, when the Bond film was shot here in Mexico, all the major stars in Hollywood had houses in Acapulco. Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and a whole bunch of other guys had a house here in Acapulco. And it was like a jet setter's dream. But nowadays it's gone downhill.
it's such a dump.
It's not the best.
It's been like taken over by the Robert Davi character, basically.
Basically.
So were you in the Acapulco unit?
Yes. Basically, I was in the Mexico Toluca. Well, the first unit was shot basically all the big scenes, as in indoor scenes and all that stuff, and only the Florida unit and the Ensenada unit, the Baja California unit, the Florida unit shot. Basically, I mean, it's quite easy to see where this guy gets married and James Bond and Robert Davi escapes. Remember on the Key West sea, and basically that was the Florida unit, but they only shot there for like a week or so. And then the Ensenada unit was the part where they escape with the trucks at the end, and the truck does a wheelie, and they're
we're gonna ask you about that.
Yeah, no, I had some questions about the truck chase, because by all accounts, that patch of road was said to be cursed, and a lot of weird shit happened during the filming of this.
Yeah. Before we get into the specifics of your questions with the truck, just we want to know a little bit about it. So James Bond movies, as you know, as probably your dad has told you, and you of course know because you worked in one, have a reputation of being cursed productions. And I was telling these guys, you are the master of cursed productions. You have been in so many. So how cursed was this production, and how does it rank with other cursed productions you've been in?
Well, you have to understand also that a movie of that size, also, I mean, it's only normal to have all sorts of little problems, and especially when they shoot in other countries, because most of the crew back then was British. The director was British, the production designer. There were three basic families that were really done a bunch of James Bond movies since Sean Connery and all that. It was the Broccoli family, which are the producers. Barbara and her father, and then there were the Lamont family, which did the production design and all that. And there was another family, which I can't recall their last names, that did basically all the production, but not the big production as in Barbara Broccoli, but the production design, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
And those were the three families that basically stuck together throughout the James Bond history. Maybe, I don't know if you guys know, but my grandfather also appeared in a James Bond movie, From Russia with Love.
Yes.
So basically, when I was when we shot the License to Kill here in Mexico, my family became famous among all the families that were involved in James Bond, because my family was the only family that had three generations working in a James Bond flick. So they gave me all sorts of crap for that. But it was fun.
Yeah, no, your grandfather is one of the best side characters in a James Bond movie.
He is one of our favorite. We gushed about him extensively when we talked about From Russia with Love.
And I don't know, I'm going to give you a little story about that. My grandfather, when he went to Turkey to shoot the James Bond film, he was very ill. He had cancer. And the James Bond film, From Russia with Love, was one of his last pictures. He was so sick, they had to shoot around his schedule because he had to go to doctors. He had to do all this weird stuff that people with cancer, with dying with cancer, had to endure, and the Broccoli family was kind enough to schedule the film around my grandfather's schedule. And I don't know, maybe the next time you see it, you can see that when he walks a bit with a little thing, because he couldn't walk very well, and all his scenes were basically static scenes, because of my grandfather's condition. So that's a little, side note that maybe you guys didn't know. And when the movie was done, my grandfather died. So my grandfather never saw the flick, the picture completed.
That's a shame. It's one of the best.
I know.
Yes.
We read somewhere that he got cancer from being in that John Wayne Genghis Khan movie,
The Conqueror.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that Terrence Young also was a body double for him.
Yes, and also what happened there is that they shot it in Utah, where years before they did those nuclear tests, and most of the cast and crew with time got sick, and many of them died from cancer, from radiation exposure.
Jesus. Do
Yeah,
not,
that's
do
crazy.
not. If you're listening to this, do not get involved in the movie business. Like it can literally kill you. Yes.
Yeah, 90% of your cast and crew could end up with radiation sickness or something.
Exactly.
But so how much contact did you actually have with the Broccolis and John Glenn, and how were they?
Oh, no, John Glenn, well, I was a director in his unit, so basically I saw him every day. I had lots of contact. Well, back then I was young, and I was a second assistant director in the main unit in Mexico. And basically my responsibilities was take care of the actors, as in give them their shooting schedule and their call sheets and all that stuff. And when they got to set, I was responsible for taking care of all their little, needs that they had. And also, since I spoke English very well, they made me their translator, because most of the people here in Mexico didn't speak very good English. And as you know, they needed someone to, help them out with the translations and with communication between the Mexican crew and the Brit crew.
And how is John Glenn as a director? Because we've talked about this, and we think like he's directed some of the best, but also some of the worst James Bond movies. So how was he on this one?
Well, but basically he was a very nice guy personally, and during work he was basically like all directors. He went there, shot whatever he had to shoot. He was very kind with the actors. I learned a lot about how to relate with the actors before filming, during rehearsals, and all that stuff. And that taught me a lot of things, because I understand your point that he did some of the best flicks and also some of the worst flicks, but I think basically it wasn't his fault. I think it was the stories. Some of the stories, especially the late stories with Pierce Brosnan and Timothy Dalton, were not the best stories. Well, were not the best movies, because they lacked the entertainment part or the action stuff and all that stuff that other James Bond movies had. And also it was to give him a point, it was the time where all the action scenes started to become, let's try to do some CGI, and the CGI technology wasn't up to level, and you could see that it wasn't the best stuff. So that made him quite difficult to make it possible, basically. And also, those stories were not books by Ian Fleming, which I think
that's true.
They were short stories or drafts that Ian Fleming had planned to do as books, but they weren't. They didn't have the stamp of Ian Fleming, which is very important, because basically Ian Fleming is James Bond. I mean,
right.
So they brought some outsider people, like in License to Kill. It was a guy named Wilson, which also was a co-producer. He also did a couple of.
Ay, te fuiste, Pedro. No te escuchamos, Pedro.
My AirPods got offline.
Si es que los AirPods son una mierda.
Yes. Well, they're good when you listen to music in your iPhone.
Yeah.
Where was I?
Te quedaste en Ian Fleming is the stamp of James Bond.
Yeah, well, Ian Fleming basically is the stamp of James Bond. It's James Bond. And the movies that we're going to talk, especially License to Kill. License to Kill was a draft of Ian Fleming. It wasn't a book. And then outsider people like Glenn, I think it's called, I don't remember his first name, but his name was Wilson. He was
Michael G. Wilson.
Michael G. Wilson, exactly. He was one of the producers and also the writer of License to Kill. And basically, that's why I think that series of films weren't up to standards, because the books weren't completed by Ian Fleming. And I think it's very important for the main author of James Bond to take care of all the films. But no excuses. I think License to Kill isn't the worst James Bond film, but it's not the best.
I really enjoyed it.
Honestly, it's in my top 10. Like,
I think
favorites.
it's mine too. It's got amazing action, like amazing action.
It's amazing action. It's a little bit different, and it utilizes Timothy Dalton properly. Living Daylights uses him well, but like this is like made for him because he's more serious and dark, and
Agreed.
it works to have like that revenge angle and stuff. I know Troy wanted to ask, for some reason he's missing, but he wanted to ask, why is Timothy Dalton so serious?
He doesn't like when James Bond is serious.
Yeah, does Timothy Dalton care too much?
No, well, he did care too much, but I think he took the role too seriously. Like Sean Connery and what's his name?
Roger Moore.
And Roger Moore. They were more of a, chatty kind of guy, making jokes and making all sorts of little things that made James Bond appealing. And then this guy tried to be, a really tough Secret Service guy. And I think it wasn't the best. Or at least not my favorite.
You like the campy James Bond?
Yes, I think. For example, I don't like Daniel Craig as a James Bond. I think.
Oh yeah.
To me, I mean, personally, I think the best James Bond is, of course, Sean Connery, and right next to him is Roger Moore, and after that, I think they went downhill on the selection of characters.
How was working with Timothy Dalton? How was he?
Oh, well, he's no. Personally, he's a really nice guy. He's for example, he's the only actor. I mean, I've worked with a lot of actors, but at the end of the movie, he gave me this huge bottle of whiskey. Those 5-liter bottles of whiskey.
Awesome! That's
Pedro,
very
this
Welsh.
is for you.
That's awesome.
This is for you, for taking care of me and making my life here in Mexico less miserable. So to me, it was a huge little thing that made me care about him as a person.
That's awesome.
Maybe you don't like his interpretation of James Bond. I know Troy certainly doesn't, but I think his acting is really great.
Yeah.
Like, I do think he's a really good actor.
No, he's a great actor, but deep down in his bones, he's not James Bond. He's a guy trying to be James Bond.
Yeah, his hairline's receding, and he looks like...
He's too much of a classic British thespian.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a nice story. Him and Robert Davi at the time were going bald. So every day they got into makeup and they used to spray him with dark paint so their hair looked thicker.
Oh my god! So okay,
That's
so
great.
we've been ranking Sean Connery's toupee, and we've been trying to find something to rank with Timothy Dalton. You've just given it to us. We'll rank his hairspray.
Yes, they used to put this little hairspray specially made for people who have thinning hair, and every day he used to do psh, and each of them had their own spray because they had different color hairs. And the action scenes where they had to run and stuff like that, especially in Acapulco, stuff like that, they used to start sweating.
Like the penguin.
They look like Rudy Giuliani.
Exactly, like Giuliani. They used to start sweating this little dark trails of sweat. And they used to say, cut, makeup. And they used to come up and redo all the hair.
That's gross.
Well, I figured about Timothy Dalton because I was watching License to Kill. I'm like, wow, his hair was kind of thinning then. I didn't know about Robert Davi. That's funny.
Robert Davi basically wasn't in the front. It was like, back
with Robert Davi's fine because he's the bad guy. With Timothy Dalton, it is a problem because he's supposed to be the coolest guy on earth, and he looks like a bellboy. He looks like if Tim Roth was James Bond.
He doesn't look like a bellboy in License
like
to
a very
Kill.
handsome bellboy, but
Come on.
A very British bellboy.
Yeah, a very British bellboy.
Another thing with Timothy Dalton's James Bond, he was basically the first that, because remember Sean Connery and Roger Moore, they used to get in all sorts of fights and get hit. But I mean, they came up and it was their hair was perfectly combed, not a bruise, not a blood or nothing.
Right.
And with Timothy Dalton was the first guy that really was messed up. You saw bruises, you saw all sorts of things. And that was very weird because we all, at the production, we were like, James Bond is not supposed to bleed. James Bond is never supposed to be, his hair messed up and stuff like that. So to us, it was a shock because it was the first James Bond that looked human, if you could call it like that.
Yeah.
How much of his own stunts did he do?
Very little.
Okay,
very
that's
little.
Good to know because he pretends that he did a lot.
Well, that's the narrative, yeah.
No, but very little because also you have to understand, very few actors do their own stunts because they push themselves to do their stunts. But in the production sense, it's a really high risk because if he jumps and breaks his leg, then you have to stop the production for the time that it gets him or healed or whatever. So it's always the producers want to have stunt doubles do the stunts. So like that, there is no basically the possibility of the production stopping and these guys losing a lot of money because, I mean, if a production stops, especially the main character, one, then there's nothing to do and you have like 400 people in another country.
Yeah, that's what's crazy to me about the new Mission Impossible movies. How Tom Cruise risking his life, and if he dies, what happens? Like, it's millions of dollars down the drain. And he dies, and that's bad, But
it's film industry. That's the difference. Well, millions of dollars are gone.
Yeah,
but nowadays it's not that bad because CGI can do. They can replace the face of Tom Cruise in another guy's. And this guy's an adrenaline junkie, so he always wants to do his own stunts. I guess he must have a small weenie, so he has to make up with it, doing all this dangerous stuff to
compensate.
To compensate and to prove his manhood,
Yeah. I don't think it's a small weenie. I think he's short, and I think Scientology does weird things to you.
Well, Scientology makes you invincible to the elements, right?
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Exactly.
Now that we're talking about stunts, Jake, you were very curious about some particular ones. Why don't you take it from there?
So the main truck chase, it looks great, but apparently making it was a complete and total nightmare, and it was completely cursed, and there were not just one, but several weird, creepy, cursed things that happened while shooting that sequence. And I was wondering if you heard anything or witnessed anything?
I didn't witness anything because I wasn't in that unit. That was the second unit, and that was the action unit. I was in the first unit. But basically what I heard is that it took a long time. Remember the truck that pops a wheelie?
Yeah.
That truck was made specially for that scene. And it was made in the U.S. And when they transported it to Mexico, something went wrong. And when they did the first rehearsal to shoot that scene, the truck didn't pop a wheelie, so they had to reschedule that particular shot. And it took a long time, and it was a hassle, and people were very pissed off, and they had to fly because on that scene, remember that. You see the truck come up, and when it hits the ground after the wheel,
so amazing.
You see
it's great.
Going inside the truck when it passes through the flames.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and you're supposed to see Timothy Dalton inside the truck.
Right.
Yeah.
So they had to fly back and forth. Timothy Dalton, he was very upset about that. He was and the stunt guy who did the actual wheelie, because it was a real wheelie. It wasn't like cables or stuff like that. It was a truck that was rigged to pop a wheelie. It was a French guy who was at that time supposed to be one of the best stunt car scene drivers in the world. So they hired him especially for that scene. and it was a nightmare from what I hear. Thank God I was in Mexico doing the nice, quiet things with the girls and all that stuff.
Yeah, you were chilling in Acapulco with drinking with Robert Davi. But what was that location? Because that is like one of the most insane mansions I've ever seen.
Well, here in Mexico, we call it the House of the Shah de Iran. But basically, that house was made by the Shah of Iran. When he went exiled from Iran, he went to Mexico. He went to the U.S. The U.S. kicked him out because they had relations back then, and they didn't want the Shah of Iran to be in the U.S. So he decided to go to Mexico. And the time that he was in the U.S., he put a lot of money and he made that house in record time, and he was there.
Wait, what?
And in Mexico, they call it the Shah, the House of Shah. But afterwards, it was bought by a guy named Portanova. He was an oil person in Italy who lived in Houston, and him and his wife bought the house, and they used it for vacationing during the winter part of the year.
Okay, so you didn't meet the Shah of Iran.
No, but I met the Portanova.
That's a little better.
and very funny because the Portanova, before he made his millions in oil, he was quite poor. And when my grandfather went to do a movie in Italy, this guy, which later became filthy rich, he was an extra on the movie.
Oh, wow.
And when my father went to film James Bond, the Portanovas were there, and the Portanova was so excited to meet my father because my grandfather basically got him the job as an extra in the movie in Italy. So he was so excited that, oh, your father was the greatest man. He gave me my first break, and I was an extra in the movie that you were in, that your father was in. So it was quite nice.
Oh, that's a nice story.
Another little story about the movie business.
Well, speaking about your dad, I mean, as a nepotism baby myself, I know it's annoying to ask about the dad, but I feel like I must ask you about your dad in this movie. You know, like how did he, like, he was already very famous by this point, I think, but how did he get the role? He's President Lopez, you know,
he's the president of Isthmus and gets with Talisa Soto at the very end of the movie.
he gets with Talisa Soto, and he looks great in that fucking Videla outfit. You know?
Exactly. Well, basically how my father landed this job, when Barbara Broccoli decided to go to Mexico, she was very good friends with my grandfather. And when he died, she kept in touch with my father, as in, Pedro, we're very sorry about your dad, blah, blah, blah. And then my father started to become a bit more famous, and he did some European films and American films. And basically when he got the chance, he went and visited the Broccolis because of the kind things that they did towards my grandfather in his last days. And when Barbara Broccoli said, we're making a movie in Mexico, she said, and the president of Isthmus is going to be Pedro Armendáriz.
Hell yes.
So basically, he landed the job without even doing a casting.
Amazing choice.
Yeah,
like,
I
don't mean this as an offense. I mean this as a compliment. Your dad looks perfect for a South American dictator.
and I don't know if you've seen many of my father's movies, but in most of my father's movies, especially American movies, my father always does it as a corrupt politician and all that. So it fits perfectly with his profile as a Latin American corrupt politician.
I know, that's what. There's one where he played Santa Claus, and I was like, I don't buy it.
No, because he got typecasted. He always did the bad politicians or the corrupt cop or stuff like that.
Yeah, he was really good at. He was also a really good Teviot. So we talked about Topol the other day, and Pedro's dad was also Tevye in a production of Fiddler on the Roof, and he was very good in it.
Oh,
Yes. He was quite good.
I need to see those.
He sang in Spanish, which was weird, but I liked it. So what else you got, Jake?
Oh, well, since you're talking about Robert Davi, I had a question. Apparently, he was method on the movie. Like, he took his character very seriously. And I was wondering, did you see any of his method antics? Because apparently he would like go into clubs or something and pretend he was a Colombian drug lord.
Oh, that's just him.
But
I don't know. But he's right. He never got out of character. He always was it was quite funny because, I mean, Robert Davi's a big guy. He must be like 6'3" and thick shoulders and stuff like that. And here in Mexico, we're all tiny. So the difference between Robert Davi and, for example, Driver was huge. And he used to get out of a truck at his hotel, and he used to walk into where the bellboys and do this mean faces to them, and then the bellboys were like shocked to see them doing all this sort of thing.
Did he walk around with the iguana?
No, the iguana, it's a very funny story. Iguanas, well, I don't know if you know this, but iguanas, they bathe in the sun like all reptiles because they need heat in order to their metabolism to start running.
Are we talking about the iguana or Robert Davi?
No, the iguana. Okay. Both of them. No, but the iguana. So in order for the iguana to sit still, they put it in a colder temperature, so the iguana's metabolism would go down. And when the reptiles' metabolism go down, they don't move at all. So it was easy for him to handle it. And it was funny because back then, they didn't have these modern lights. There were the movie lights used to give out a lot of heat. So he used to have the iguana in his arm, and do take 1, take 2, take 3, and by take 4, the heat of the lamps basically warmed up the iguana, and its metabolism started to pick up, and the iguana started to get restless. and this guy was, I mean, he looked like he loved the iguana, but he was a bit phobic about the iguana. It was, oh, this thing is starting to move. Put it in the coal. Put it in the coal. Let's take 5. Let's take 5.
Well,
his method acting only went so far. He's just like, get the fuck off of
He doesn't love the iguana that much. That's hilarious that you're saying this, because I was watching it and I was thinking, well, they obviously got an iguana for this because they had used a cat for Blofeld and they realized that was a nightmare. So they probably got an iguana because they thought it'd be calmer. So it's funny that it was also like going crazy.
Remember, filming with animals and kids is a nightmare.
Yes.
No matter what. It's always very troublesome to film with those two.
And certain actors.
Well, those actors aren't called actors. They're called kids. But he's a really good actor.
Oh yeah,
no, he's great, and it's
and
funny.
I think he epitomizes even though he's not Latin, because he's basically Italian descent. He's a prototype to me of the Latin American thug.
Yeah, well, if John Turturro has taught me anything, is that Italians are allowed to play any ethnicity and it's okay.
Fucking Italians. No.
we gotta isolate that clip for our Italian friends.
Yeah.
Well, you know who I was the most surprised about all the actors? Benicio del Toro, because Benicio del Toro,
right.
It was one of his first big roles that he had. And a funny thing, he studied with me high school in the States.
Oh, no way, really?
Oh, I didn't know this.
Yes, and many years after, we met up in the set of James Bond, so it was quite fun.
That's all. Is he nice?
Lovely person.
Oh, wow.
Lovely person, and we used to. And he's back then, I don't know now, but back then he was a party animal. So was I.
He looks
and
like
in Acapulco the other day, we wrapped up, and it was, Benicio, what do you want to do? Let's hit the clubs. So we went out clubbing until 5 o'clock in the morning. We had basically went back to our hotels, took a shower, and went to work. So it was
Can you
fun.
stop being the most interesting person I've ever met? Every single time I talk to you, you have an amazing story about I was partying with Marlon Brando and
Well, that's what happens when you work in this fucking industry.
I'm now just thinking of like Benicio del Toro is bringing out the knife, being in character at the club, cutting out.
He was so funny.
Cut out
He
your
was so
arms.
funny. And back then, nobody knew him. Basically, he was a up and coming actor. Nobody here in Mexico, nobody knew him, and it was fun because. During the weekends when all the actors said, okay, we'll go with you guys partying and stuff like that. I mean, Timothy Dalton was people knew who he was. Robert Davi, some people knew who he was. Well, the girls, basically, they were girls and they were hot. So basically everyone looked at them. But us two, which were the youngest, were the masters of the clubbing scene in Acapulco where we were filming.
That sounds like such a cool production.
That sounds fun.
It took a long time. It was 3 months of shooting.
Oh wow.
That is. What's the longest production you've ever been in? Was it like Troy?
No, well, Troy was long because of when we were shooting Troy. This was shot in Baja, and a hurricane passed by. And remember that in Troy, the huge Troy wall, the hurricane came in and basically knocked it all down. So they had to rebuild it. So we stopped production for like a month and a half or so.
Jeez.
But no, I think this was the longest.
Yeah, 3 months of production is an eternity. It's brutal.
You know also what was a long shoot? Rambo 2, which was shot in Acapulco.
Oh yeah, now I'm like, so you're on set of Rambo 2.
Yeah.
This is now a Rambo 2 interview for Jake.
This is now the Rambo 2 interview.
Rambo 2 interview, clap.
Yeah. All right. Fuck license to kill. Fuck James
Fuck James Bond. Yeah, I think Rambo's much tougher than James Bond.
Oh yeah, probably.
I mean, yeah, it was shot in Acapulco, basically the whole movie.
You've worked in like 10 of Jake's favorite movies, I think.
Oh, and I'm going to say another one that basically is one of his favorites also. Predator was shot in Puerto Vallarta.
Wow.
I remember when I went to Puerto Vallarta when I was a kid, they were like, oh yeah, Predator was shot here, and I hadn't seen it yet. I'm like, what the hell is Predator? And then I finally watched it when I was older.
and that's what shaped your taste in movies.
It shaped my taste. If you look at my room, it's just like, oh, okay.
I think it's one of the best Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, to tell you the truth.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, because it's John McTiernan, and he's like one of the best action directors like ever. It looks great.
This is another thing that you guys might not know, or you might. You know who was the first actor to be casted as a Predator, as the alien?
Wasn't it Jean-Claude Van Damme?
Exactly.
Oh.
And he was such a pain in the ass. He got canned at the middle of the film, and they had to bring another person.
What did he do awesome. On set? I'm curious.
He was an ass. I mean, understandable. He had to be in this weird uniform in the Puerto Vallarta heat, which is unbearable, doing all this action.
Yeah.
So it was every 2 seconds. You need to take a break for like an hour, and I need this and I need that, and this hurts me, and I cannot move my arms and all that stuff. And the director got fed up with him and said, you know what? I think you'll be best in Los Angeles. So take a hike.
Based.
Oh wow! So did you get to see the original Predator costume before they figured out the final design?
No, because it's funny because it took a long time. The guy that made the costume was the same guy that did the alien costume in the alien movies. Mm-hmm. But back then, they didn't have all these materials, light materials or breathable materials. So it was basically like an armor.
Like a coffin, yeah.
at the beginning it was very uncomfortable and stuff like that, and they flew the guy to Puerto Vallarta to modify as the shoot went along to make it more movable and stuff like that. Originally on the movie, they didn't want to have the Predator. You know how it's invisible and all that stuff. They didn't want to have him that much invisible. But since the costume was so difficult to operate or to be in, they relied on that effect, basically like Jaws. You know, the
Instead
thing
of
wasn't
thing didn't work.
working. So let's try to see the least possible amount of time this thing, and I think to me it was a success, like Jaws, because it hypes up the
tension.
When you finally see it hypes up the wow, there it is, huh?
Yeah. Well, now speaking about Predator, Predator was directed by John McTiernan, who directed Die Hard, and Robert Davi's in that movie, and Robert Davi's also in License to Kill. Jake, do you have any more License to Kill questions?
and also about Die Hard, both Johnsons from Die Hard are in License to Kill.
No, License to Kill.
Anyway, I don't have a specific License to Kill. You answered pretty much all my questions, but my last question for you: what's your relationship with the Bond movies? And like your grandpa was very famous for being Karim Bey in From Russia with Love. Your dad was the president of Isthmus, License to Kill. Does that impact like your view of the James Bond movies, or do you look at it more casually, or you're like, fuck these movies or something?
No, I mean, James Bond is if you're a movie fan, James Bond is a must. It's a series of films that basically took everyone from the Secret Service guy, which is one of the best persons or characters to make a movie around him. I mean, every time you see a James Bond movie, you say, "Oh, I bet this." Basically, James Bond to me is like the Rolling Stones. Each tour, you say, "This is gonna be the last. They can't make another tour." And bingo, another tour comes up and say, "God damn, these people never die or what?"
Yeah, it's just like magic.
So to me, James Bond is the one of the pillars of this cool-looking guy that always saves the day, always gets the girls, always kicks ass, and well, nowadays he gets messed up. But back in my days when I was young, this guy never. His hair is always perfect. His suit is always perfectly ironed, and then his shirt is impeccable. And to me, I think it's the prototype of the cool guy in the movie. Like John Wayne in westerns, I think James Bond is to the Secret Service or to the this cool guy.
Yeah, well, we obviously agree.
Yeah, no, and you're like, and you're like elevated because you're just like, hey, I worked on a Bond movie. My dad is in a Bond movie. My grandpa's in a Bond movie.
No, it would be nice if they gave me free tickets, but I had to pay my fucking ticket to get into the. So there is nothing that makes it best.
Did you watch the new one?
Yes.
What'd you think?
I think it's not my favorite one. I like I said before, Daniel Craig to me is not the quintessential James Bond. I think they rely also too much on CGI nowadays, and that to me takes away from the essence of James Bond, which are physical stunts, believable shit. Nowadays, basically, James Bond is like a Han Solo from Star Wars. Is a guy from another galaxy.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite one?
James Bond?
James Bond, that movie.
My favorite one, to me, I think is I like The Spy Who Loved Me.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the favorite ones here in the podcast.
Yes.
I like The Man with the Golden Gun.
We love that one too.
We love
Of course, From Russia with Love. I would be, stupid not to say that. And the best one of all, of course, has to be License to Kill.
Yes.
Well, yeah, of course.
Amazing film.
Yeah. No, but I think those two. And you know which one I also liked very much? Moonraker. Moonraker, I think it
There
was.
we go.
Paul, now you're representing Paul because
Paul loves that one.
You know your shit, Paul.
Okay.
Paul's obsessed with the pigeon that does a double take after Bond drives his gondola out of the water.
But to me, I think what makes the Bond the best movie is who is the hottest Bond girl. That to me is the most important thing about.
And who is it?
I like Barbara Bach.
Yeah, she's great.
Oh, yeah.
You and Ringo Starr.
Pretty great.
Yeah, no, exactly.
When I was young, I had all sorts of weird dreams with her, so she has to be my favorite Bond.
Producer Paul, do you have any specific questions for our guest?
I'm terrible at interviewing people, so I think I think you guys did pretty well.
I'm enjoying it.
Jake, any final questions, thoughts?
I have one question. Have you heard of the From Russia with Love video game?
What is it? Is it a video game from what, PlayStation or what?
It's for the GameCube.
Yeah, it was like made back in like 2005. It was for like the GameCube, but so basically you could play through From Russia with Love as a video game, but they added like the jetpacks and like a whole like an evil base.
They modernized it.
They didn't modernize it. It still takes place in the 60s, and Sean Connery came back as Bond.
He sounds a million years old, and your grandfather's in it.
Yeah, and your grandfather's in it. His likeness is in it.
I've never seen the game nor played it. I'm not much of a gamer.
Yeah.
Remember, but that I'm old, and to me, top of the line game was Tetris and Space Invaders and crap like that.
Well, I'll send you clips from the video game because I think the guy that they got to voice act for your grandfather does sound a lot like your grandfather.
Well, good. At least they got that right.
Well, is that it? I mean, how do you close an interview? Do you say the end or?
You say fuck off.
Go work in Mitsubishi.
No, you press an eject button and then you shoot yourself out.
Exactly. or basically like this. Quick.
Yeah.
Pop out of camera.
All right, well, Pedro, you're a very busy man. I know this. We greatly really appreciate you coming on. This is the closest that we've ever gotten to like a real episode with like actual insight.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
We are forever grateful to you.
You've elevated the tone. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was my pleasure fucking around with you guys. Jake, Paul, John, it was a pleasure. Whenever you need someone to shoot crap in your podcast, I'm always here for you guys.
Amazing. I hope we make you a recurring guest.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you've worked on so many classics. We might have to have you weigh in.
Right.
Let me just say one thing. Work. Not really. You know, you hanged out and hard cars and
Well, yeah, that's the thing with movies is that they're hard to make, but in the end, like 30% of it is getting drunk at the beach.
just standing there watching time go by.
Yeah, occasionally say roll sound, and that's it.
But you know what's the best part of a movie?
What?
What's the best part?
When they say wrap it up.
Oh God, the sweetest words in the English language. So let's wrap her up the interview. Thank you very much,
Okay,
Mr. Pedro Armendáriz.
Yeah, thank you, Pedro.
Peace.